Welcome everyone to today's webinar, 5 Ways Community Practices Can Optimize Revenue. On behalf of Becker's Healthcare, thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to walk through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any question you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you don't see your slides moving or have trouble with the audio, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box, and we are happy to help. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Cindy Nyberg is CFO of Associated Urologists of North Carolina and managing member of Amaryllis. Cindy is a certified public accountant with over 30 years of experience in banking, construction, small business, and healthcare. She is currently the CFO for Associated Urologists of North Carolina and the managing member of Amaryllis. As the former CFO of Riley Neurology Associates and Fulcrum Strategies, Cindy has experience in managing the financial and operational challenges of a large independent medical practice and financial consulting services, including managed care contract negotiations, strategic planning, revenue cycle reporting, and project management. We also have today Karen Holman, Vice President of Operations for the New York market of Solaris Health. Karen came from one of the original practices whose physicians joined Integrated Medical Professionals, an affiliate of Solaris Health. Ms. Holman has more than 25 years of experience in medical practice management, revenue cycle management, and compliance functions. She has extensive experience in clinical research, both in data management and as a study coordinator. She supervises the corporate business office, divisional office managers, and is responsible for the implementation of the new practice management of an electronic medical record software in all locations. Today, with that, I'm pleased to now turn the floor over to our moderator today, Parag Shah, who's president at Integra Connect.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you again, Karen and Cindy, for taking the time and joining us on this webinar. And for those attending, appreciate your spending a little bit of your day and joining us to kind of go through a conversation really around the industry trends that we're starting to see in not just revenue cycle management, but this sort of new iteration in RCM, which is really starting to push more on practice management, financial performance, and demanding practices to go beyond the standard billing and collections mindset. And what are some trends and what are some things that we've seen, especially with those that are participating on the panel in terms of decisions practices are faced with. We'll be able to talk a little bit in terms of is there an appropriate or a right time to consider an RCM partner? And then if that's a choice, what are some key considerations practice should be keeping in mind? And then ultimately at the end of the day, what to expect. The goal for a lot of practices that we come across really tends to circle around this shift in healthcare that is now starting to straddle, your traditional sort of fee-for-service approach of billing and collections and maximizing revenue, but starting to now delve into the world of value-based care. And how are the changes, whether it be for plan design differences that are coming down the pipe, or practices being pushed into a pay-for-performance or a pay-for-value type of a contract, and how that can be managed and what types of demands that's putting on the organization. We hear quite often from our practices that with the current environment, there's so many challenges, not to mention just the Great Resignation as one, I think, pushing even more on organizations to fill staff shortages and find people with the requisite experience and financial know-how, but also being able to manage information that is outside of, again, the traditional revenue cycle space of an ICD or CPT code, and then just being able to push back against denials. It's now starting to take into account a lot of clinical data, a lot of information that typically was not, part of how we looked at or tried to manage revenue cycle. Many organizations are, sort of facing these challenges at more of an unprecedented scale now. Some of these things have been around for a while, but now we're starting to see that they've sort of hit critical mass, if you will. With that, I'd like to, touch on just a couple of these and ask Cindy and Karen to weigh in. But when we look at, this shift, obviously the staff shortages is one, but it's also a matter of trying to manage the increased volume, whether it be payer, specific rule sets that keep changing, or the increase in AR due to denials or initial denials for documentation requests and so on. Karen, let me start with you. Of some of the things that you're seeing, what are the things that either keep you up or maybe at least used to keep you up late at night?
Revenue cycle keeps me up late at night. We have, having outsourced, we have decreased our staff. You always worry about communication. I think that's a really important aspect of outsourcing revenue cycle. And, communication is very important, and it helps the whole cycle, so that there is, so that the home base can make sure that the outsource understands what's going on and vice versa, because there are challenges with connectivity, things like that from time to time. But I think communication is really an important aspect of the whole revenue cycle.
And Cindy, from your perspective, how has being able to find the right resources or the lack of right resources impacted some of the decisions you've been making? I know you work with more than just one practice, but how has that started coming to your mind, or what are the things that you think are the biggest issues that practices face?
Well, the first thing that I did dealing with RCM when I joined AUNC just a short time ago was the first issue that came to be. And, of course, the first thing you think about is, can I staff this? So I'll be honest with you, normally I would not have ever recommended using a third party for my billing. I like control of it. I like being able to sit around the table and look at the staff in the eyes and listen to the questions. But then when I evaluated the scope of work that Integra was presenting and proposing versus what I would have to do to staff a fully functional, effective billing department, train them, document what they were doing, I decided, I would need to go with a give a third party a try. There were concerns about how we would build a relationship, like as Karen mentioned, how we would communicate, how effective it would be. But, when the physicians decided, then it's time for us to act and make their decision to go to a third party, Integra, work. And that's what the sole focus has been. Looking at some of my other practices and the problems that they're having right now, the challenges that they're facing, staffing is the primary one. Trying to even get somebody to come in for an interview. That's the biggest challenge, and then also getting people to follow through on doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So you're kind of, leading right into this in terms of the practices are facing a lot of these challenges. So while the environment might be changing, things that practices could do, and again, these are just 5 of the things that we hear quite often, either you manage by existing staff doing more, figuring out a way to train employees on some hyper-specialized AR, especially in the specialty market space. A lot of what we hear in the community-based setting is it's just you're trying to manage more and more with less and less resources, in terms of cost of employees, in terms of cost of other solutions. Obviously, you can hire additional staff. That's becoming more and more difficult. And then the last is investing in technology solutions. Are there any other challenges that you guys see outside of these sort of key areas that practices try to struggle to make a decision on? Cindy, I'll start with you if you have anything else to add.
Well, the thing is that, the one thing we can say about healthcare is it's not stagnant, it's dynamic. And if you can hire the additional staff and you can train them, then they're still having to be able to be nimble and flexible and deal with the changes of the payers, such as a payer putting an edit on, and that now everything you submit for a certain CPT code or modifier has a prepayment edit audit on it, and they have to send in medical records, and sometimes sending medical records multiple times. That adds another layer. I'm dealing with something right now is, a service is now being, they think the payer is denying it for pre-auth when it really doesn't. So then this employee now has to deal with 20 claims or 50 claims that should have been paid, and now that sets their workflow behind. There's this dynamic change in healthcare that's constant that has you have a problem keeping current.
That makes sense. And then Karen, when you look at your practice and, within the growth that you're having within urology, even within the market space, outside of looking at other technology solutions, have there been areas that you've looked to augment the team or augment what approach IMP has taken to manage revenue cycle?
Well, it's as Cindy said, it's very difficult to find staff. It's difficult to have to even have them show up for an interview. So we have set in place. We've used technology to help make that burden a little bit easier. And because of the technology, and I know you said other than technology, but technology has really been an important aspect in revenue cycle and what the teams are able to do, and how the teams are able to look at things and claims before they go out, so that we have that cleaner claim on the front end, and it does help decrease the burden on the back end.
That's great. I think, again, the two of you have hit on a few of the things on screen right now in terms of approaches or issues with those approaches that practices probably face. A lot of it seems to stem around, the staffing, whether it's the investment that you have to make in order to get the right staff or the time it takes to train to be able to get that specialized knowledge, whether it be payer-specific or specialty-specific. How is this type of thing impacting your staff that is actually there? With those that are day in, day out still continuing to do the work within the practice setting, are they starting to feel any sort of burnout? Is this starting to push them to a point that it's just becoming unmanageable, or do you feel that there's a balance that you've been able to strike between what you do in-house and where you have chosen to work with a partner? Karen, I'll start with you.
I think that we've found a balance working with the onshore versus and offshore staff. I'm going to go back to communication and how important that is in everybody understanding what their jobs are and how things are trained. When we started with Integra, we had a really good system. We had SOPs for everything. And when Integra came on board, those were all in place. There were people from Integra here in the States learning what the processes were so that there would be no disruption in any of our AR. And it didn't happen. And Parag knows that was my mantra when we first started. It is very frustrating, but you do need that. You need a core team that can work with the outsourced team because they are, they understand and are up to date on whatever the edits, things like that, as Cindy referred to a little bit earlier. All of that is communicated on a regular basis so that we make sure that everybody understands what has to be done and how it has to be done.
And Cindy, I mean, in terms of with AUNC, how much of this was something that was starting to impact sort of the patient experience or the provider-patient experience even, when there are challenges with managing the revenue cycle or getting the patient bills out, right? How much of this becomes a provider visible, if you will, issue or a concern that patients start bringing to them?
Prior to the transition to Integra, the providers were very, very concerned about the revenue cycle. They were very involved. Patients were not being communicated with effectively. Basically, because of the strain on the department, there were only so many hours a day. And, when you talked about the strain on the staff, when I first came in, before we transitioned to Integra, the staff was under incredible strain. When I look at practices outside of AUNC that are doing their own billing, I can start to see the stress of it. It has increased over the past 12 to 18 months. Working through the transition with Integra, my physicians are now relaxed. They feel confident in that the work is getting done, and I have been continually communicating what's been being done and continually passing on information from Integra to alleviate my providers' concerns. I have also been able to firsthand watch Integra build a relationship with the billing staff, and I will tell you the billing staff is probably 200% more happy now than they were. And they had a lot of concerns about how they were going to be able to work with the Integra group on site. And there are no concerns now. I'm watching staff members thrive now. And I'm watching physicians be able to just take care of their patients. And if there is a patient concern with working with Integra, we're getting immediate follow-up and notification of that and being able to deal with that.
Well, it definitely sounds, in terms of both what Karen, you and Cindy are saying, decisions were made at different stages. I think, Karen, for you several years ago, Cindy more recently, in terms of turning to a revenue cycle management partner or a solution provider for those types of things. Obviously, part of what we see and what we hear, and not just from a company perspective, but more from a customer or industry perspective, is this need to be able to have the appropriate staff, whether it be quantity or it be skill set, and then that, of course, to improve practice outcomes. There's also this overwhelming push that we see that in order for it to be more of a end-to-end process, right? Not something that is a point solution, or maybe not something that's cobbled together with a bunch of different components, but rather centralized. And then ultimately, if that happens, it seems like there's for those that are managing the day in, day out within the practice, less time spent, administratively, sort of transactional, day-to-day, task-related work in terms of trying to increase revenue, and then rather being able to focus on things that are maybe more strategic or, a better use of time for some of the most seasoned employees that are within the practice, and ultimately setting yourselves up for growth, going forward. That being said, where we really feel that from an industry perspective, where practices are starting to look at what are the key areas of consideration, and this is one where I think you guys alluded to some of these as we go through, what would be the number one thing that you would look for in a partner? I know whether it's one or two, but sort of your key considerations. I know communication was definitely one, but as we look at the ability to marry up or match up to a practice of specialty versus being able to provide reports, or manage KPIs, or even just sort of this ongoing collaborative approach around industry trends and continuing to provide knowledge to the practice, is there any one or any two things that you feel are the linchpin of what considerations practices should be really looking at or pressure testing if they're looking to choose a partner in the RCM space? And Karen, how about you go first?
Well, I think that they have to. It's important to learn the specialty, especially if it is specialty specific. Training on what the practices are. Now, we had a very good process down, and and Integra trained on our process. We were looking to consolidate and reduce our overall costs, and went from a billing department of 35 to 12 people with staff with the help of Integra. So I think that if you are not experiencing any RCM issues, it's important in the transition to choose a partner that you can work well with, so that there is no interruption. If you are looking for if you're looking to improve your RCM, I think that it's important to find a partner that can work with you to streamline your processes.
That's great. Cindy, any thoughts in terms of a key item that was important for you or the group?
Well, yeah, I think if you're talking RCM, there's your central purpose. And your central purpose is to collect efficiently the money that has been earned by the services provided provided by the physicians and the group. And so that absolutely has to be your primary goal. And then how you get there is what probably will differentiate an RCM partner versus a billing department or RCM partner compared to a different partner. It's, does this partner have the knowledge to do your specialty? Are they compliant? Do they document properly? That is everything documented and communicated. Do they have experience in the technology that you use? And then there's the side benefit, and it's something that some may chase people away from in RCM. Third party is the cost, because they look at your fee, and if they don't take into consideration the direct cost of having a fully staffed business billing department. And then I think what I'm learning is, number one, I'm almost equal on cost, then I've got some other efficiencies and economies of scales that are starting to show. So it's a whole package of, can you build a relationship with this RCM get the job done and get it done effectively and, either reduce your costs or not increase them. And then there's other things like, can your RCM provide you with business intelligence that you did not have before? The reporting, that's all part of that communication. So you're central on, are we getting the job done? And then what do we need? How does we fit together to be successful on that?
I think that's great. That's great insight. We've spent a good amount of time kind of walking through what practices face, where the industry is going, and kind of leading indicators of why organizations will be pushed to sort of look at or make decisions around whether they're outsourcing or choosing a partner for doing either an end-to-end or full point RCM solution. With your specific experience and in terms of things that you would say were key takeaways, obviously everything doesn't go right the first time necessarily, or the exact way you'd want. Karen, I know you've had a few more years in that experience of what's worked, what's not. What would be maybe a pitfall or two that you feel practices should look out for, something that you feel that came up as an issue but was addressed, and how would you do that maybe differently in a RCM outsourcing situation?
Well, I think that it took a while to get everybody up to, not a while, but to get everybody up to speed from both sides, the ability to work with one another. Okay, there were frustrations because it was something new for us, and that was, I guess it was it's 4 years, almost 4 years at this point. Familiarity with the teams and the way that they work together, and becoming experts in whatever particular portion of that RCM process you're involved in. The core team here works well because they're experts in what they do, so it helps facilitate what Integra does as well. And it's so, the frustrations in the beginning are frustrating. I mean, it just is, and I don't know how to say it any other way, but
yeah. But the more along the lines of trying to manage that change, the change management that has to occur when you're making that transition, and if I'm understanding right, more picking a partner that's going to be able to not just provide a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather coordinate and work with your practice specifically and some of the nuances that you would have within the group, as opposed to just a standard fit.
Right, and there are nuances, and the Integra team and the integrated medical team are they have a wonderful relationship. They do work well together. They will communicate with one another out of work too. Okay, so we've created a relationship with Integra, and Integra has created a relationship with us that it just makes the work process easier for us. Employees, it was difficult, but and there are changes, right? Our staff has not changed. There have been some changes on the Integra side, but they come up to speed rather quickly and are well trained by the Integra team now too, rather than just by the IMP team.
No, that's great. I think it sounds like more that there's a true partnership there, as opposed to a feeling that you're outsourcing something into kind of a black box and, stuff happens, you don't know what, as opposed to individuals are working sort of day in, day out just as if they were an extension of your staff?
No, it's an absolute positive relationship that we have nurtured on both sides.
And Cindy, you started saying that this was something you never would have recommended or never suggested, and you were sort of put into a position where I think you said the physicians had made that choice. What would you say has been the experience, not necessarily from you, but even from the team, in the short few months that you've chosen to outsource?
I mean, you're correct. I never in a million years did I think I would recommend or even work with an outsourced billing department. And the experience has been incredibly positive. We haven't had a stumble, which is amazing. And that's not just my opinion. I work with two very excellent directors of operations, one for each region, and they share the same opinion. And all of us were very concerned about this transition. But from the start, having someone from Integra on site helped to build that relationship. I sat there and I watched your staff member, your team lead, come and work and listen to the staff about how they did things. And it was never like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. It was always very positive. They took what our staff members were telling them, and while there were changes in workflows, it was always presented in a very positive manner. And then it was always put down in writing so that everyone could agree, disagree, change. And the staff was really worried about the turnaround of communication. And the Integra staff had very high expectations about communication turnaround. And that was really worrisome to the AUNC staff. And it wasn't a week. And the AUNC staff was turning around and making sure Integra had all the information they need prior to, much sooner than was actually even expected. So that on-site relationship building really, really helped to seal the deal. Everybody enjoys them. Everybody wants them to come back. Again, as Kelly said, they're a team. Everybody was worried about the time difference. That's not even an issue. And all expectations have been exceeded. I'm the person that has a plan A, B, and C. We didn't even get off from, even deviate one little bit from A.
That's great. That's great to hear. As we try to think through some final thoughts, I think a lot of what you guys have said, I probably know the answers to these questions rather than reading them off. In terms of, as opposed to recommending using an RCM partner or not, any thoughts to what practices should be considering before they start reaching out to a potential RCM partner? So anything that should be, any decisions or any questions that they should be answering prior to making that choice and spending the time that it would take? Because obviously that's going to be a pretty significant undertaking. Cindy, maybe from your perspective first.
Okay, I'm an accountant, so I would always think about cost, what it costs me to deliver the service internally, if I can actually staff it and deliver internally, versus what an RCM would cost us. I would have to also evaluate the internal performance. Are we getting the job done versus what a RCM can do? I had somebody one time tell me when I was cleaning up some billing stuff, they were like, well, and I would ask them, why is there all these claims sitting here? And they were like, well, we thought we had enough money So we were collecting enough. I was like, well, you're not collecting enough until you've collected all that you've earned. Integra has that mindset that we're going to collect everything that has been earned. So I would need to look at that mindset from an RCM. You know, are we going to get the job done? Are we going to come on site and invest the time to actually build this relationship? I'd have to learn about what the communication is. But, you know, the basic thing is are we going to collect what has been earned by these providers?
That makes sense. Karen, you know, we've spoken many times before about the shift to value-based care. And, you know, while that might be in the early stages for some groups, but later stages for others, there's still that need to maintain specialized knowledge of almost on a payer-by-payer basis. How, you know, when we say what kind of results you can expect to achieve, how has being able to partner or outsource the RCM work from your perspective on just managing and understanding the payer requirements, whether that be, you know, traditional fee-for-service requirements or even some of the things that are starting to lead into VBC?
Well, I'm going to go back to communication, and you know, because we are just in the New York area, so which is pretty picky, right? So there's lots of different things that go on with the insurance companies, and we on a monthly basis have our team look at all the insurances to see if there are any updates, meet with Integra to make sure that everybody understands, send the communications to Integra so that everybody is on the same page, looking to make sure that the appropriate payments are paid, that the medical records that are required are sent to the insurance companies timely, so that we can, you know, our turnaround can be better. You know, insurance companies these days are requiring medical records for everything, and more and more. That I think that part of it is that they're trying to make up for, you know, what went on during COVID. So we're still recovering from that, but the more the better the team does in terms of sending those things out and working together, the more successful, you know, we are on both sides.
Great. You know, I think in terms of where the industry is going and the need to be able to find solutions within a, you know, practice sort of financial lifeblood, which is with the RCM, whether it's in-house or outside, or, you know, point solutions or end-to-end, there's definitely this changing dynamic of whether it's, you know, in the traditional fee-for-service, but needing authorizations for things that we didn't need before, or needing prepayment doc review, a lot more to manage, let alone when you do get into value-based care. And, you know, especially with some of the things that we're seeing, not just in the urology space and the oncology space, among other specialties, you know, push to try to get him into two-sided risk models, and how now that has a further impact on true revenue cycle, not just get paid for the claim that you're sending out the door, but how do you maximize every opportunity for revenue? And I think, you know, along those lines, you know, as you're looking at where the practices are moving to, and what the, you know, future state might look like, are there any hesitations or considerations that you haven't already voiced, or is there anything else that you feel would be the next step in terms of where rev cycle is heading? Cindy?
Well, I think, you know, we can experience, you know, I've seen a lot of different VBAs versus fee-for-service and how different practices are handling it. The one thing that I think Integra sets me up for really well to be able, and we haven't even, AUNC has not started with value-based yet, but I think I would not be real concerned if we started heading down that path because, and I alluded to it, but the reporting that I'm getting on a daily basis would be able to help me to guide through value-based implementation much easier than if I were trying to do that reporting myself. And some, and I've seen some practice be able to do it very well and to be able to have internal people be able to pull data. But we all know, coming out of practice management systems, that's sometimes a stretch. And you do, again, that's going to be an additional cost if I have to have a well-trained analyst and I might not have the consistency there. The reporting that I'm getting, and I know just with a simple request, if something were to change on my contracts, I could get even more reporting because of the business intelligence services that Integra is now offering to me. I mean, I'm 100% much better than I was 2 months ago in the reporting realm. And it doesn't take a lot of time on my part to do it. And reporting is a key on value-based, and a lot of the payers don't do it well either.
Yeah, it's definitely a constantly changing environment, and I think that last comment it's very important that quite often practices are faced with contracts that even those that are furnishing the contracts may not know exactly how to administer or measure against.
Well, and another thing is like one of the things that I'm getting is reasons for our denials and which providers are having problems with that, so that I can even go back to them in fee-for-service, think about the reporting I could get and help them navigate value-based.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank both of you guys. I think at this point, with some about 15 minutes left, would like to hand this back off to you, Kelly, to maybe moderate some questions that will be coming through for the panelists.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have some questions here that have come in, as you mentioned. And first of all, we have one audience member who was mentioning how you were talking about the need to navigate billing and payer contracts and, of course, which takes specialized experience. So the question is, how do you know the people working on your projects have the right experience and have that specialized knowledge?
This is Karen. Do you want me to answer that? We have, from the integrated medical side, we have the team that works, the core team that works here has, all of them have 6-7 years of experience working with integrated medical. And what we did and what we found to be the best way to navigate insurances and what's going on with the different insurances was to have specialized teams. So I have there's a Blue Cross expert, there's a United Healthcare expert, and down the road, and they are in the weeds with Blue Cross all the time. If there's something that changes, if there's something that gets denied, we will typically find that kind of a problem out immediately. Integra, as soon as there's a denial, will contact us, and the teams that work on the IMP side work with the Integra teams on the aging side as well. So they are specialized. They are seasoned individuals. We do have certified coders at also, and payer contracts are always a challenge. We look at our fees. We look to see how we can optimize our relationships with the insurance companies as well.
And we also have a question here. Any tips for selling in the idea of working with an RCM vendor to providers? How you can motivate them to be open to that?
How you can motivate providers to be open to RCM? Is that the question?
Correct, yes.
The providers, in my experience, the providers will be open to working with an RCM if they believe the RCM is going to do a better job of collecting their revenue. And a lot of times, I think you'll see the RCM, especially if there's a problem with billing, the providers will lead. That's what happened with AUNC. The providers led the move to an RCM. And I've experienced that in different practices. And also if you can prove that it's cost effective.
Absolutely. And we also have another wanting to know, how have your existing employees responded to having an RCM vendor? And how has their workload changed, if it has?
I'll answer that, and then Cindy can answer as well, because I think we are in very specific specialties, but there was, when we first started, there was concern about outsourcing our RCM, and they were cautiously optimistic. Okay, but as the relationship grew, it a lot of the fears and things like that went away. If there is something that Integra is not able to do in terms of or needs a little more information, then the core onshore team will go over things with them, will explain what's needed, why it's not needed, and if appeals don't get to where they need to get to, then we do have conversations with the insurance companies. And again, communication and education is really important.
Yeah, I would think our staff has changed from like the keyers and the payment posters to the communicators, and we do still have certified coders that code specific surgeries and procedures and work directly with Integra to make sure those claims are filed correctly. But the people that used to be the posters, that were the ones that were worried that they were going to be outsourced, have actually gained knowledge from Integra. They're working more directly. They're able to have the time to resolve specific questions that Integra has. So they're actually, what I would say is they're thriving, they're learning, and they're doing so much more than just data entry.
The data, I agree with Cindy, the data entry has significant
Hello?
Hello, this is Cindy Nyberg.
Yes, we are going to go ahead and get to maybe a few. We have time for a few more questions today, so let's go ahead and we have a question here too. What was the one capability you would add to your existing RCM services if you could?
Well, we're just new, so everything that we have been experiencing has been positive, and the one thing that I continually add is, can I have this piece of data? Can I have a specific write-off report? They have helped me with a report that helps me to allocate revenue to the providers that probably saves me 6 hours of time and is more accurate. So I'm right now in the point of just fine-tuning management reporting and asking for more.
And along those lines, what area did you decide to tackle first and why?
In management reporting?
Yes.
Well, and the first thing I didn't have to tackle is because I get a comprehensive monthly dashboard that's in a PowerPoint that, you know, shows me my charge lag, my days in AR, all of the key performance indicators. It shows me accounts receivable by provider in an aging bucket. It shows me different denial trends. It shows exactly what they're working because Integra has helped us with a little bit of a backlog. Then we get the phone reports are phenomenal, and that was something I hadn't planned on, was the amount of time and effort that their phone service has taken off from our employees. And we get feedback based on patient experience. So to begin with, the reporting is comprehensive. I'm an accountant. I love data. I'm an operations person. So like I've asked for a revenue allocation that has helped my efficiencies and workflows. I'm going to ask for some profitability next on some different drugs and procedures that we do, because I think they'll be able to help us. Visually, they're presenting things great. The PowerPoint I send out to all of my providers so that they're just aware of what's going on.
Right. And I know we have talked a little bit about this. Is there anything else that either of you had mentioned as far as were you any concerns you had with using a vendor for your billing, or plans you made for that disruption? Anything else you would add there?
Well, I had concerns because I never would have probably considered it unless I almost had that little nudge to look into it, because I truly enjoy working with billing departments. That was my first job when I entered healthcare, is to help a billing department catch up and clean up. I have high respect for people who work in billing. I think it's great positions that people can grow and develop careers. So I like that. Being pushed into looking at an RCM was a growth area for me, because also, you know, you kind of lack control, and you have to be able to trust those people that are collecting your revenue, because that helps you meet payroll and pay your bills and pay your providers. So that was a growth item for me. I had concerns about how we were going to communicate. I had concerns about the time difference. I had concerns about whether they were actually going to follow through on a timely basis. I have no concerns. And I'll tell you, like, an example of how a report that I get every morning when I open my computer is I just select pre-auth and I understand we have to do it, and I understand we have to check eligibility. But I also know in a practice, realistically, sometimes that's difficult to get done. And now, every day, the two directors of operation and I and the billing department gets a report on this is how many appointments are booked today. This is where our, how many we've added in. This is how many we've already known about eligibility. This is what's missing, and we have to work this yet. So right out of the bat, we can say to the staff, you have 3 that you have to check eligibility for. And it tells me like a 5-day history that now there's no pre-auth or no eligibility being missed. And if there is, we get a report, I need these 5 pre-auths that need to be done. All right, then think about the beauty of this. As a manager, I'm not relying on an employee saying, oh, yeah, we're done for the day. I can ask, why are these 5 what's going on with these 5 pre-auths? Or if I see a pattern exist, I was like, whoa, why are we having this problem? It's because I'm getting reports every day, and it's a report that I don't have to work on. It's being delivered to me. And so it's much, much easier for us to manage the AUNC's responsibility because we're getting automatic feedback. And if we miss that feedback, then we ask Integra what's going on.
Well, it looks like we have time for maybe one last question here. And so what are you having your staff do now that you do have an RCM partner?
We have 2 certified coders that they do code the specific surgeries and procedures and send those up to Integra. And then there are certain other services that we make sure the codes are on correctly. And then there's 3 staff members that they just basically, they're the communicators. Integra has actually even taught us how to use our practice management system more effectively so that they communicate right in within the practice management system, and they send each other tasks. And these 3 employees are tasked with finding the information, reaching out to the providers, and responding to Integra. Most likely the goal is 48 hours. I would imagine the majority of the response is within 1 business day. And so that means our charge lag has, I like to do today's work today. Basically, we are now reaching today's work today, and we weren't in the past.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it looks like we are almost at the end of our time here today, but I thank you so much to both Cindy, Karen, and Parag as well for this excellent presentation, and Integra Connect as well for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented today, please feel free to check out the resources section on your webinar console and fill out the post-webinar survey. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.